So we were all wondering what the next poll would show after the second debate, given the fact that, well, we thought Dominic, for example, Anglade did reasonably well. I think a lot of people might have been impressed with Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. So let's fill you in on exactly what's going on right now. Christian BOURQUE, Executive Vice President at Léger Marketing, is on the line. Monsieur BOURQUE, thanks for the time.
My pleasure.
So I will just say, generally, from what I can see here, it's fair to say not a whole lot has changed. Is that a fair overall assessment?
Not a whole lot. We sort of need to go beyond the voting intention to sort of see where the trend is. At 37%, the CAQ is well ahead of anybody else, but they've lost 5 points since the start of the campaign. So it's starting to show a little bit. The only ones really making real progress is the Parti québécois of Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. After two good performances in both the TVA and Radio-Canada debates, now at 15%, but at 15%, in terms of number of seats, that doesn't mean a whole lot for the Parti québécois. In second place, Québec solidaire at 17%. Again, maybe not enough to threaten the Liberal Party in terms of number of seats to form official opposition. And at 16%, well, it continues to be fairly bleak in terms of potential returns for the Liberals.
Have you ever seen four parties being in such a dead heat for second place before?
No, and probably the fact that they are is because there are four parties. I mean, that pie, if you slice it up in too many slices, then all of these slices become very small. Even at 37%, which is exactly what the CAQ got in 2018 when they won the election, they're still far from being threatened in terms of the potential for a minority government, because, again, the opposition is fragmented. Once we go beyond the data, though, and we look at our question that we followed throughout the campaign, who's led the best campaign this week? Now in first place is actually Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, in front of Gabriel Dano-Dubois. And in the first 2 weeks of the campaign, Saint-Pierre Plamondon was the last. So, in fact, he is making an impression, and he's sort of allowing I would say, somewhat disgruntled voters that were siding with the CAQ to say, you know what, I'll go back to my old pair of slippers that I liked in the past, which is the Parti québécois. Now, this is where the CAQ needs to watch out. Advanced polling numbers are now in. This would be at 22 point something, the highest turnout for advanced polling that we've ever seen historically. Is it just a trend that people want to vote early, or is it an indication that turnout on October 3rd might be better than what we expected when this thing started? If that happens, it's because those voting against the incumbent are motivated to actually go out and vote.
Which was my next question. So number one, what does that typically mean? And number two, you just brought up a point I hadn't even really thought about. Yes, we've had great turnout in advanced polling and record numbers. Is there, in fact, a correlation between advanced polling and the actual voting itself?
So far, so good. We don't have a ton of history with advanced polling, both on the federal scene and also in the province of Quebec. But so far, there is a correlation. So we expected turnout would be in the low 50s. Not as bad maybe as the Ontario election, but certainly in the low 50s, which would be a low historically for Quebec. But this is probably an indication that we should do a bit better than that. The only place, though, if you break down advanced polling by riding, the ridings where advanced polling is the lowest in the province of Quebec are right now the Liberal seats, most of them in the West Island of Montreal. And again, if Anglophone voters and Allophone voters stay home like they did in 2018, this does not bode well for the chances of the Liberals to make a decent showing. So on October 3rd, we should all go out and vote.
Okay, so just to specify, historically speaking, a high early voter turnout, advanced voter turnout, historically tells us that voters want change. Is that what we garner, generally speaking? Yes.
So we may not be in the sort of the high 60s in terms of turnout, which we got in 2018. But my most pessimistic scenarios of a low 50s turnout, though, I somehow feel a bit better about that perspective. And I think it shows in the fact that some people are going towards Québec solidaire, some people going back towards the Parti québécois. The only movement we're not seeing is back to the Liberals. Even though, as you mentioned, Dominique Anglade had a very good debate on Radio-Canada, much better than the first debate on TVA. But is there still time to sort of herd the sheep back in the Liberal camp?
Yeah, you know, I'm fascinated by the support that seems to be there now, according to the polls, for Paul St. Pierre Plamondon, and I love the reference in the story for today, suggesting that he's taken the Jack Layton approach. It's interesting because when you watch the debates, he is clearly the most soft-spoken of all the candidates and the least one to launch necessarily personal attacks, if we can call them that. And I wonder, as opposed to what you said, Christian, about people going back to their roots to vote Parti Québécois, if somehow this is more about Paul St. Pierre Plamondon than it is about the Parti Québécois.
That certainly is a possibility, and probably there's a little bit of both. Some voters might say, you know what, I've given up on the PQ, and you almost feel like you want to reward him for a campaign. Started out in fifth place in single digits a month ago to where they are now, so I think there's a lot of him in there. And for some, it's basically a lot of talk early in the campaign was, is this the end for the Parti Québécois? Will they even get one seat? Will they be shut out of the National Assembly? And I think some people are saying, well, you know what? I may not be ready for sovereignty now, but I don't want to let it die. I don't know if that's the right word, but something along those lines.
Okay, and again, I mentioned this the other day. It's funny because when we started this election, everyone was saying, well, here we are, finally an election in Quebec where separation's not even going to be an issue. But of course, Dominique Anglade went out of her way at the last debate, at the Radcan debate, to point fingers at all the other leaders. Obviously, Paul St. Pierre Plamondon and Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois have separation in their platform. Éric Duhaime says he's shut the door but hasn't thrown away the key, which to me seems like, if the time is right, he could be convinced that it's a good idea. And François Legault, for all intents and purposes, has said the same. He said, the appetite is not there for it today, but he's not closing the door on it anyway, which makes her stand out really as the only federalist party, if you will, that people, at least here, I would get mainly Anglophones, would consider voting for.
Absolutely. And I think she was right in attempting that strategy. And really, she was not all that interested in Éric Duhaime's answer or anybody else's. But she wanted Legault to be sort of embarrassed by the question because, on the one hand, he needs former Liberals to form government, and on the other hand, he doesn't want to lose the ex-Péquistes because, really, the CAQ is sort of an umbrella party that basically needs supporters on both sides. And I think she, by design, asked the right question of the Premier.
Did these latest findings in this poll lead you to believe that following the debate, people, for whatever reason, felt compelled to go vote? Something moved them and compelled them to get out to vote early?
I think there's disappointment with François Legault himself and the CAQ because they really have led a fairly poor campaign. If you attempted to be more uninspiring, I challenge you to try. And I believe it's hurting, sort of the luster, or that veneer that he had during the pandemic period. I think it's being sort of toughened up and scratched away over the past few weeks.
I wonder, I thought I heard Éric Duhaime today answer a question which began with, and I'm not sure what survey or poll this came from, a survey that said that 62% roughly of Quebecers do not like François Legault. And the question was, well, given the fact that so many people don't, isn't it going to be something that he could win an election, form a majority with such a small percentage of the vote? Did you see that, or was that part of a question in a poll that you saw about François Legault's popularity?
Yeah, I read the quote, and I assumed that he basically had tallied up all of the people who would vote for somebody else than the CAQ, and that made up his 62.
Okay.
Mind you, where I think Éric Duhaime is wrong is in the last poll where we polled, are you satisfied with the work that the Legault government had done? And it was still at 59%. So there's a lot of people on October 3rd and probably over the last weekend who will not vote for the CAQ, but still think they did a good enough job. So that's where I believe at 37%, I mean, they are still in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and I can't imagine much will change between now, obviously, and Monday. By the way, when is the deadline? There can't be a poll coming out when? After Saturday?
No, it's actually as at the minute that the polls open on Monday morning.
That's it.
Is the moment where we cannot publish new polls.
Okay.
So we'll be out there on Sunday.
All right, Christian, as always, I thank you so much. Very much appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Christian BOURQUE from Leger Marketing, still at 37%, although as he did say, Natasha, they're down 5 points from where things started.
Love what he said. Like, you couldn't really have had a less inspiring campaign if you tried.
Great line.